Hi, my name's Lindsay. I'm a teacher at Chatsworth High School and Community College, which is based in the Salford Local Authority. This is a special needs school which serves students aged between 11 and 19 years old. All of our pupils have EHCPs, which describe their learning difficulties. There's a broad range of learning difficulties that our students have, including profound and multiple learning difficulties and autism. This week, we began a new unit on educational leadership in professional practice. In this model, we're going to consider issues such as concepts of leadership and management, leadership in the educational context, as well as leadership and diversity. We're going to be given an overview of theories of leadership, leadership styles, leadership for motivation, enhancing learning and teaching through leadership, leading change, what educational leadership is, and the wider community and the evaluation of effective leadership in schools. We're also going to consider research-informed practice and the importance of this. I'm really looking forward to learning more and especially how it can help and impact in my setting. We first looked at the difference between leaders and managers. So both leaders and managers are crucial to the success of all organisations, including schools and other educational establishments, but the titles are often used interchangeably. There are, however, key differences between them. So a manager is someone who would schedule work, delegate tasks, oversee teams, and coordinate resources and effort to make sure that tasks are completed in a timely manner and to a good standard. These are often rational thinkers and they'll follow set standards and written procedures to achieve that task. Leaders are someone that builds the team by inspiring and motivating the members of that team. They have a clear vision and they focus on that vision and share the vision with members of their team. They'll often share their inner motivations and create a positive team feeling. The best leaders are often also effective managers who can balance the needs of their team with those of the organisation. Next, we looked at the role of a leader within education. There are 5 key principles of educational leadership. The first one is a vision of academic success for all the students. This is really important. There's often been a historical gap between students on different socioeconomic levels and high and low achieving students, and also to consider inclusion for students from different ethnic backgrounds. The second element is that educational leadership should be a safe and receptive learning environment. This healthy school environment is key. You need to provide comfortable, orderly and structured classrooms, ensure that you've got rigorous procedures in place to make sure everyone's kept safe as well, and look after the well-being of students and all staff within the school. The third element is that educational leadership or good educational leaders should delegate responsibility to others. It doesn't just mean the staff within the school or the senior leadership team. All teachers within the school should have responsibility delegated to them, and parents and students should also be empowered to take responsibility and to accept accountability. The fourth element is to ensure that instructional methods and curriculum content are continually improved. So this could be by listening to guidance from the Department for Education around updates to curriculum or ensuring regular CPD. And fifth and lastly, the field of education should borrow and adapt to modern management tools, processes and techniques. So this is looking at the latest research, policies and practices that are out there and implementing them in a meaningful way within the organisation or within the school. After completing the first week, I considered what I'd learned and then thought to my own school setting and how it applies there. So we've definitely got a lot of managers within my school. If I consider the wider SLT group, for example, within HR, they tend to stick to managing their departments, to managing people. Same to an extent with DSL. We've got office managers within there. Curriculum leaders will often just stick to their own curriculum. But there are, however, good educational leaders that do inspire. They tend to be the assistant and deputy heads and the head of the school. But it's really something to consider that the other managers within the school who are managers could then learn something and become better leaders as well. We began week 2 by looking at assembly line learning and how it can lead to factory model teaching. So schools were first set up to teach basic English and maths, and more was added to the curriculum, which is a good thing. Obviously, we want our young people to learn about history, geography, and so on. But is there a point now where it's almost too much? As well as pastoral care, we need to teach life skills, British values, prevent, safeguarding, almost to the case where you're doubling as a social worker sometimes. And to allow these extra things to be added to the curriculum, a lot's been taken away, and it's normally the funding's been lost to arts and creative subjects. So if we consider the workforce of the future, how is that going to benefit them? If we're teaching to this factory line model at the moment, where every student gets the same education, we're teaching towards a future in the workplace that we don't know how it will look. Without those creative skills, will the students be able to cope with the ever-changing future workforce? Next, we each looked at our own school's vision and mission statement. I found it really interesting reading through this and seeing how closely it aligned with what we learned last week about what a good educational leader is. So the points within the trust mission very closely aligned to that. Some of the points that really jumped out at me were to celebrate each pupil as a unique individual and to identify aspirations and ensure how they want to achieve those whilst keeping the students safe. I think that what we've just talked about with the factory assembly line learning, that is something that my school's quite strong at. I'd look at the students' EHCPs, look at their skills, look at what they're good at, look at what engages them, and then to cater their learning around that. I found it really interesting to next look at the role of head teachers. So historically, head teachers were seen as an often older white man, but in his cap and gown, an authoritarian figure whose main issues were discipline, results, giving instructions and expecting those to be immediately carried out by both staff and students. Now the role of a head teacher is much more dynamic and much more open and welcoming for students, staff and the wider community. It's not a closed door policy. They're not always sitting at the desk. There's lots of other things that they will be doing, and they've got a much more collaborative and transformational leadership style. We looked in more detail at the ever-changing role of head teachers, considering 3 different sources. So Powys School, an article in The Guardian, and an article from The Secret Head Teacher. These were the notes I made during the lecture. If you look at the different categories here, there's a lot of issues around management with things like paperwork, meeting with schools, staff training, admin, filling out forms. The leadership one is actually quite blank, which is unfortunate. Under own well-being, there's issues there like no breaks, working till 8 p.m. I didn't have time to eat any food. Lots of communication across the board, lots of different teaching tasks. But then one of the busiest columns is other. So there's things like cleaning up the playground, morning gate duty, getting chairs and tables out, covering absences, checking the soap in the bathroom, and other things. So I found this quite interesting that under the leadership, there's not really a lot there. And considering what we've learned about educational leadership, and good leaders should be leading their team and not so much managing and dealing with these administration tasks, it was interesting to take a deeper look at. When I returned to my school, I found myself considering what we'd learned this week again. So as I said earlier, I do think that one of the strengths that we have is to look at the individual needs of the students. But I was really reflecting on their long-term aspirations and goals and how we can support them. So some of our students are do have quite profound learning difficulties and disabilities. What is the future for them? What does their future hold, and how, more importantly, can we be supporting it now? If they are going to be living independently, are we doing enough to support that in the future? And then I thought about the different roles of the head teacher. We're in transition at the moment. We've got a new acting head who's actually the head of the trust, who is quite an inspirational person. But it's just something to think about. the different roles and how people within the senior leadership team can manage their time a little bit more effectively, perhaps. Week 3, leadership theories. I was really looking forward to this. I enjoy looking at the theories and reasonings behind things. So although it was quite tough going, there was a lot of reading to do. It was very interesting and we really learned a lot. We began by looking at 2 of the earliest leadership theories. So going back in history to 1847, Thomas Carlyle wrote a book called On Heroes and the Heroic Men in History. And in that he stated that the history of man has accomplished in this world is the history of the great men that have worked here. So that's the basis of the great man theory. It states that leaders are born and not made, and only those with a natural tendency to leadership are designed to lead, these are natural born leaders. Leading on from this, Sir Francis Galton, who was a British scientist and actually Charles Darwin's cousin, hence the reason for the similarities between some of the things, published an infamous book called Hereditary Genius. So this was in 1896. He expanded on Carlyle's ideas, but laid the theory behind the traits theory. He believed that human traits and abilities, such as intelligence, are genetic, meaning that leadership is hereditary. Leaders are born and not made. Galton was an advocate for eugenics, though, so his work's considered unethical today. Both of these theories laid the basis for future leadership theories, but they're largely discounted now. Next, we looked at behavioural theory. In 1939, Lewin identified 3 styles of leadership behaviour: autocratic leaders who make decisions independently, democratic leaders who actively involve team members, and laissez-faire leaders. There are advantages and disadvantages of each of those, but a skilled leader should be able to adapt their style depending on the nature of the task. A further example of behavioural theory is task-orientated versus people-orientated leaders. So people-orientated leaders prioritise communication, collaboration, and team member well-being. This means that team members feel engaged and valued and part of the success of the organisation or school, for that matter. Whereas task-orientated leaders prioritise achieving the results. They want to meet deadlines, they give very clear instructions and guidance and closely follow the team performance. That lack of flexibility, though, can lead to reduced morale. A more modern leadership style is transactional leadership. This focuses on systems of rewards and punishments. Rewards could be in schools things like having extra break time, stickers, praise, and they encourage repetition of behaviour. Punishments in schools could be missing a break time, having a letter sent home to parents, things like that. And that is to discourage the repetition of behaviour. Transactional leadership comes from behaviourist learning theory. The 2 main types of behaviourism are classical and operant conditioning. The most notable example of classical conditioning is Pavlov in 1897. His experiments with dogs resulted in him being able to ring a tuning fork to encourage the dog to salivate. Operant conditioning was famously used by Skinner in 1925. He experimented with rats and used food pellets as a reward, positive reinforcement, and electric current as punishments, which was negative reinforcement. These both determined the effect on the rat's behaviour. The main advantage to transactional leadership is that it's simplistic, you can give clear expectations, and it's quite straightforward to do. However, it is viewed as a lazy leadership style because it stifles creativity and engagement and doesn't really focus on individuals' personal development. Effective leaders should have an understanding of the tools and principles of all the 4 main categories of leadership theories: traits, behavioural, contingency, and power influence. However, transformational leadership is regarded as one of the most important and effective leadership styles. Bernard Bass published a book in 1985 called Leadership and Performance Beyond Expectations, where he outlined the 4 I's of transformational leadership. First one, idealised influence. This means basically that transformational leaders serve as role models. They gain trust and admiration and respect of their followers. Number 2, inspirational motivation. Transformational leaders are optimistic about the future and they motivate their team members by providing a compelling vision with clear, achievable goals. Number 3, intellectual stimulation. These transformational leaders encourage creativity, innovation, and critical thinking amongst their team. And number 4, individualised consideration. Transformational leaders show genuine concern for the individual needs, strength, and development of all their followers. Transformational leadership is linked to many positive outcomes and arguably is considered the best form of leadership. However, leadership is a very complex concept, and the effective leadership involves a combination of theories and approaches which need to be tailored to the situation, the circumstances, the task, and the objective. It was really interesting to learn more about each of these leadership theories, and especially to see the advantages and disadvantages of each. When I look at my own school, it's really easy to identify the different styles that the members of the senior leadership team have. But what's more interesting is those that are well regarded, respected, and get good results are often transformational or transactional leaders rather than the more old school authoritarian. Week 4, we're over halfway through. It's going so quickly. This week we looked at diversity in educational leadership. So on the 19th of June 2023, the latest school workforce in England data was released. So I went back and looked for the last 4 years. So I've got data from going back to 2019 and categorised that female, male and unclassified, and then further categorised into the positions of classroom teacher, deputy head, assistant head and head teacher. So the reason that I was doing this was to look at the numbers of male and female teachers in the classroom and have a look at the proportions. And when we look at the sex of those in the school workplace, it's clear that female teachers make up a high proportion of the workforce, but they are much less represented in leadership positions. So working in schools has long been seen as women's work, whereas leader roles are more stereotypically male. This could be down with women needing to take time away from their career for periods of maternity leave, for caring for elderly parents, a staged or reduced hours return to work to accommodate busy family life once they do come back into work. I mentioned then as well about the male traditional traits of leaders, which could be described as strong leaders, assertive, competitive. On a female leader, those are often considered derogatory terms, or alternative, more derogatory terms are used, such as bossy, demanding, and challenging. Also, women are much more likely to suffer from imposter syndrome and have less confidence in applying for leadership roles unless they feel 100% sure and certain and ready to do so. There was a recent study that found that men apply for a job if they meet only 60% of the qualifications and believe they'll wing it and get there on their confidence, whereas women will only apply if they meet 100%. Which leads on to the gender pay gap. So I used the same source data to go back 4 years. Sorry, it's cut out there. We're starting in 2019 on female there for 37,654, and then going further down to current figures. This gender pay gap can be attributed, as we've said, for females having periods of absence and so on. When they do have those periods of absence for maternity leave, for caring needs and so on, when females returning to work, they're often not placed equitably on the pay spikes or pay spines, meaning that they're paid far less than their male counterparts. In every single position there over the last 4 years, you can see that women are paid less than men. Using the same source data, we can see here that teachers from minority ethnic backgrounds are underrepresented in leadership roles compared to the wider teaching population. There could be a number of reasons for this. Institutionalised racism. A white older man is seen as the norm for leadership roles, or recruit and interview processes that lack inclusion and ethnic awareness. It could be unconscious bias and prejudice. Recruiters may favour those who fit traditional and stereotypical leadership norms. These might not align with the experiences and characteristics of teachers from ethnic minority backgrounds. Also, there's a real lack of mentorship and support for teachers from ethnic minority backgrounds. And without that guidance and encouragement from existing leaders, they're probably less likely to envisage themselves as potential leaders. They might even lack the necessary networks to access leadership opportunities. I couldn't find any recent reliable data on this, but it's also really important to have educational leaders from different socioeconomic backgrounds. It means that they'll offer diverse perspectives to students from similar backgrounds. They'll be more empathic and make decisions that will benefit those students. It could things like varied extracurricular activities, which should raise cultural capital, and ensuring that resources are equitably distributed, so given to the students that need them most, not just fairly shared to all. This would be also enormously beneficial to students to break the cycle and the class ceiling by seeing a representative role model to aspire to within their same background. This also applies in having educational leaders from diverse sexual orientations. This is absolutely massively important to promote inclusivity and provide role models for LGBTQ plus students and staff. So leaders who are members of the LGBTQ plus community will be emotionally more able to advocate for these students, address discrimination, and drive forward inclusive policies from that place of personal understanding and empathy, which would lead to safe and supportive educational environments being created. One of the quotes that we came across, which has really resonated and stayed with me, is "You can't be what you can't see." It's enormously important for children and young people, the students in our schools, to see themselves represented in the educational leaders that they encounter throughout their school lives. So these teachers and teaching staff should be of both sexes, different races, ages, socioeconomic backgrounds and sexual orientations. It's really important for staff as well to see educational leaders across all spectrums as role models for them. When I consider the range of leaders in my workplace, in my school, it was quite an eye-opener. So we've got 10 members of the senior leadership team at the moment. 2 are male and 8 are female, which kind of goes against the norm, it seems, whether that's due to the fact that it's a special educational needs school where staff might be seen to be more nurturing and caring, going back to that traditional female role. Of the 10 SLT, 1's openly gay and all of them are white. So not very representative there. And there's a similar spread across all of the teachers and the other support staff within the school. Now, a large proportion of our student body are male, especially the autistic young people. The latest numbers from the Autistic Society say that the most up-to-date estimate is it's 3-to-1 male to female ratio for autistic young people. So again, that's not represented within the teaching support staff and SLT at our school. A large portion of our students as well are from ethnic minorities. So again, that's not represented amongst the staff that they see and the people that they look up to as role models. Something else that I found quite interesting to consider is obviously all of the students in our school are disabled. We don't have a single member of staff with a disability that they've disclosed to everyone. So it's really interesting that there isn't a disabled role model for our students to look up to. Now, I've actually spoken to our head teacher about this, and he said that in the past they had a programme where the volunteers could come in, and a lot of them were young people, actually former students in some cases, with disabilities. Due to that stopped during COVID, and he said there were a lot of safeguarding concerns because it can be quite a different environment for adults within the workplace. There's health and safety considerations and safeguarding considerations as well. So it is something that needs to be carefully balanced. However, our head agreed with me that it's something we definitely need to look at in the future. And we're looking at reintroducing that volunteer programme, which would benefit the young people coming in and volunteering, giving them a sense of purpose, and it'd benefit our students, giving them role models to look up to. In week 5, we looked at creating effective leadership teams. So first, looking at the history, especially within smaller schools, traditionally there was just a head teacher and perhaps a deputy head. As schools have grown, or as smaller schools have been included into academies and trusts, there's an ever-expanding list of senior leadership team members, assistant heads, deputy heads, curriculum leaders, designated safeguarding leads, key stage leaders, inclusion and behaviour leads, the list goes on and on. But to create that effective team, the ultimate leader needs to look for team members that have the skills and strengths for that role and have a strong educational background and a passion for teaching and learning, but that will also have a real desire to improve their skills and to collaborate and to share those skills with other members within the team. So every member of the team should understand clearly what their own roles and responsibilities are and trust in each other, and should engage in meaningful continuous professional development that's differentiated as well. So we've all been there sometimes where you go into a training session and it's just as bog standard for everyone in the room, and some have already done it, some it's brand new to them, some are in the middle. So I think that's quite key, the differentiated training that takes place. Within that should be included mentor programs, peer observation and feedback, and opportunities to share effective teaching techniques to improve overall practice. Within my organisation, we do have weekly training, and it's something that I would identify as a bit of a weakness. It is that same training for everybody across the board. It would be much more beneficial if perhaps a questionnaire went out beforehand and said, right, the training this week will be on sensory needs. Is this something you feel comfortable with? Is it something you need some more work with, or is it brand new to you? And then we could be split up into 3 groups so that the training could then be differentiated and add more value to the people taking part in the training. Again, in the past, due to the diverse nature of the students that we've got, there's been training that I've sat in, and it's for very able students that the students in my class cannot access the curriculum in the same way. So it's kind of a bit of a wasted time. It feels very much like a box ticking exercise, and it's demoralising to be in that situation, and it doesn't really lead you to be a valued member of the team. So that's definitely something that my organisation can and should build on. Something, when I have gone back again and had a discussion with a member of SLT around that, they have taken it on board and they said they're going to be looking at it in the future, but next year or from September, to try and address some of those issues, they've now created a separate department called the Department for Complex Needs. So that will be my class and 4 others, and we will have our own training and we will have our own leader within the department, and we'll have our own meetings, and that will hopefully motivate us to become part of a shared vision and to work together towards that vision. So work in cooperation and collaboration, communicate effectively, and achieve that end goal of really improving the teaching and learning for our students and making sure they get the best possible experience from school life with us. For our last talk session, we looked at community and talked about how effective educational leaders will engage with the wider community to ensure excellent outcomes for their students. The school community can include stakeholders such as parents and students, staff, the governing body, Department for Education, Ofsted, local authority, as well as those closer to home. It's really important for leaders to reach out and communicate with local businesses, guest speakers, and community project leaders. This helps to bridge the gap between theoretical learning and give practical examples and experiences of the wider world, making teaching and learning meaningful and inspirational for the students. Having a strong sense of community ensures a supportive network with a real sense of shared ownership, belonging and pride for everyone involved in it. This will drive practical and emotional investment in student outcomes, which ultimately will improve the quality of teaching and learning. This is also important for students from low SES backgrounds or different ethnic minority backgrounds to engage in that two-way communication with the community. The leaders within the school get to create a more inclusive learning environment. I think engaging with the community is a particular strength at my school. These pictures show a recent trip that the students made to a special football school in Basel. So this trip was facilitated via links with Manchester United, and the students that went there had the most amazing time. Other recent initiatives within the community were visits to a community cafe, the Levers Prom, which could not have been facilitated without local businesses donating a flower wall, balloon decorations, and lots of other things. Summer Fair, which was really, really strongly supported by the community, and an international day which held about a month ago as well, which again was strongly supported by the local community. Although I don't work directly in an educational leadership team, I still found a lot of value on this course. It was really useful to understand styles of leadership in schools and identify which work well in practice by looking at my senior leadership team. It was great to understand the different ideas that feed into an effective leadership team and to be able to, again, identify what's working well at my school and where there are some gaps in the knowledge. And it was great to have the ideas listened to that I had after studying this module, and hopefully they will be implemented as I've been told they will. From my own perspective, I've already scheduled regular meetings with my own staff team from September, and my aim is to become a transformational leader to all of them. Revisiting the 4 I's, I want to influence by leading by example and gaining their trust and respect. I'd like to inspire motivation with a clear vision of our aim for the school year. Intellect stimulation, I welcome new ideas. We're working towards that shared goal which will benefit the students, and individual consideration. I want to provide support and mentorship to help them achieve their goals as well. Thank you.